And just like that, the FRAM2 mission is complete. The crew of 4 adventurous astronauts completed the first crewed polar orbit mission after orbiting Earth 55 times and passing over the poles about every 46 minutes. There was lots of excitement and tons of interest online as the crew shared video and images from orbit live via Starlink. And after a whirlwind of a week, it's time for a quick review on what they did, the science and research involved, and the interesting ways this private human spaceflight mission is showing us aspects of crewed flight we don't usually get from classic NASA missions. And it's all setting up the potential future where we get to go to the moon and Mars for human missions. So buckle up and let's dive in. Welcome to Today in Space. And before we start segment 1, where we're going to talk about some more of the science done in orbit, if you don't know what FRAM2 is or you want a quick refresher, check out our latest episode for a 10-minute breakdown of what the mission is, who the crew was, and why it was important. And feel free to pause and jump back in here when you're ready. In our first segment, we'll run through 3 more experiments the crew performed in polar orbit. First up is SpaceXray, where the crew performed the very first X-ray in space, which just happened to be 130 years after the first X-ray was performed on Earth. There was a great image online showing the first X-ray on Earth and the first X-ray in space, and you could really see how far the technology has come and the image clarity from back then. We learned more about this during the live launch hangout for the FRAM2 launch. Some SpaceX employees were doing a great job of explaining all the possibilities. And so we learned that not only would the crew perform an X-ray to showcase what's possible for health and emergency triage, but they could also use it to X-ray mechanical equipment, which could be a great troubleshooting tool for crew on a long-duration space mission to the moon or Mars. Basically, instead of requiring deep knowledge and documentation about some hardware on the spacecraft or Mars colony equipment, you could just X-ray the portion of the equipment to get a better idea of what's inside. On Mars, you have about a 5 to 20 minute delay in live communication when you're communicating back to Earth, and the range of time depends on how close or how far Earth is from Mars at any given time in orbit. Something like the Space X-ray could help them address things much faster than they can communicate with an expert back on Earth. And this immediate troubleshooting option would not only be great for the astronaut's sanity while waiting for steps back from Earth communications, but it also could be a means of survival if immediate action were needed. They could actually save their lives with something as quick as Space X-ray to check out what's going on. Next up is another great test for the future of humans living in space, growing food in zero-G. When we travel space on a long mission, we won't have the ability to just get more food, at least not as quickly as we have it here on Earth. That means deep space crews will need to grow food along the way. The Mushvroom Mission had the crew growing oyster mushrooms mid-flight, and those would be tested back on Earth after the return. According to FRAM2, oyster mushrooms are the perfect space crop, helping astronauts meet their nutritional needs on long-duration space missions, like those to Mars, while closing the loop in plant agriculture and helping to minimize inputs and waste. But not only that, oyster mushrooms grow fast. They don't need a lot of water. They have lots of nutritional value, containing vitamin D, potassium, selenium, and copper. They can also be eaten raw. You really couldn't imagine a better crop for space. And that's a really great consideration for crops to bring with you on your 5-year journey in space for an adventure like Mars. The grown oyster mushrooms will be tested back here on Earth, probably already underway, to see how these zero-G oyster mushrooms compare to their Earth gravity-grown counter fungi. Third, let's talk about one aspect of the mission that's really intriguing to me, which are the views from orbit of the polar regions, both the surface of the ice caps on Earth and the auroral images, and capturing Steve in space. You get these tendrils, spikes, and streaks with Steve, and they're a very specific condition for auroras here on Earth. Jannicke Mikkelson was in charge of gathering those images, and I know it'll be quite the show when we get to see them. And to think that the crew was orbiting the polar regions every 46 minutes, and had about 55 orbits to do all of their science and capture everything. On the one last orbit mission, Jannicke had been going 535 miles per hour on an aircraft around the poles. But on Crew Dragon, their velocity was 17,150 miles per hour, or at least on average for that type of polar orbit. That's 32 times faster than the last time she observed the poles and their auroras. I really can't wait to hear more from her about this and to see those images. As of the recording, we still haven't seen anything, but it's amazing that we even got as much as we did from the team live, and I'm sure any day we'll start seeing those images. So look out for them. Segment 2. The uniqueness of private astronaut missions. It's noticeably different than NASA human missions, and a lot of that is just that we typically only see NASA human spaceflight missions. Even the Crew Dragon missions to the ISS are technically NASA missions, where FRAM2 was a SpaceX-led mission. First, the fact that the mission took off on time and in under a week the crew was back home was truly astonishing. Aside from Inspiration 4 and Polaris Dawn, which are both SpaceX-led missions, we never see NASA human spaceflight missions launch and return within a week. Most NASA ISS missions last months. As someone who follows these things pretty closely, it felt fresh and exciting to see this fast-paced mission go up into orbit and have the crew share video while they're up there, only to land safely before I've even had a chance to see everything that they've done up there. Next, we saw multiple videos from the crew, specifically the mission commander, Chun Wang. But more importantly, we saw a 15-minute video uploaded online from orbit during the mission, and it seemed like it was no problem. I mean, I don't dare upload a 15-minute video unless I have time and a wired connection. I wouldn't even trust my own home Wi-Fi to upload a high-res 15-minute video. But Starlink clearly made that possible, and I know NASA astronauts do not have that kind of freedom to post on station. So while we see regular images and videos from astronauts like Don Pettit, who's doing amazing work up there, we're not seeing same-day releases like we saw on FRAM2. Not to mention, direct from their phone, which again, is not something NASA astronauts have at their disposal. And I'm sure there are some astronauts chatting it up about wanting to have that the next time they're in space. Next, on a similar vein, we saw video from the crew inside the spacecraft while deorbiting. You hear the noises inside the spacecraft and the crew just bobbing along and seemingly grooving to the rhythm of hardware, prepping for atmospheric re-entry. It's wild. The level of comfort that the SpaceX team has provided in the Dragon spacecraft looks next level, and especially when you compare it to something like the Soyuz. And I'm really glad that we got to see and hear that. And lastly, we saw crew egress from the vehicle after landing and doing it of their own accord. Not only was this part of the research for the mission, but it's an interesting comparison to what we see on NASA and Roscosmos missions, where there's a lot of help from ground crews to get them out of the spacecraft. And I think there are a few things that happened here. First, it's only a few days long mission, so the effects of zero-G shouldn't have done the damage that a longer, month-long mission may have. So they may not need extra help. And since it's a few days long mission, this is a great opportunity to see how the astronauts are able to handle themselves when they return to Earth gravity. And this is also a first for SpaceX. We see a very hands-on crew helping astronauts get out of spacecraft when they do recover these. So it's not like SpaceX isn't doing this, but it is part of research for them starting to back off and letting the crews do their own thing. And thinking ahead to the future, if we are going to have humans travel space and go to other planets, we need to start testing how astronauts exit the spacecraft. Those first missions won't have crew to help them out, so you do want to make sure that you catch any subtleties while you have support crew here on Earth, right? Like the way that they step out of the spacecraft. Is the lip of that spacecraft safe enough so that the astronauts don't injure themselves, or that the suit doesn't get torn or overworked trying to get out? These are things that typically you're helping crew out, so you never really see that happen. But what happens when they have to do it themselves? That's what this is all about. And before that future even happens, it's just great to gauge what astronauts are capable of after their time in zero gravity. More data helps us understand the toll it takes on different kinds of human beings, but it also shows the capability of humans after such a trip. It's a great stepping stone for what's to come next. And that's the episode. We hope you enjoyed our review after the FRAM2 crew has returned safely to Earth. If you have any questions about the mission or the science involved, let us know. We'd be happy to dig in deeper for you and learn more along the way together. Subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, and make sure to like the video. And make sure you're following us online at YouTube at Today in Space, Instagram at Today in Space Pod, TikTok at Today in Space, and on X at El Greco. That's ELGR3CO. It's my personal account. We'll be going live for future space events with a few fun ones coming up. So make sure to subscribe so you get notified when we do. Jump into the chat, say hi, we can all hang out and watch together. Have a great week, stay curious, and don't forget to keep spreading love and spreading science. Be well, and we'll see you next time.